bad legal advice. There's a lot of Monday morning quarterbacking that goes on, especially like amongst other lawyers. For example, like if one lawyer represents somebody on any kind of issue and they explain how it was resolved to some other random lawyer, that other lawyer might say, I can't believe that was the outcome you got. I can't believe blah, 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 and just kind of criticized all the nature of the outcome that was received on behalf of the client. When the truth is, like, being on the outside makes it a lot easier to judge this kind of stuff, right? Like, that's like where the expression comes from, Monday morning quarterback. It's easy to say, maybe in hindsight or maybe as an outsider, like, oh, you should have done this or you should have done that. So that does happen a lot. I actually had this client that I represented call me not too long ago, and there was a similar situation going on that she had that I represented her for elsewhere. And she said the opposite outcome from what she got, what was preventing her from having the outcome she wanted, that was had in this other deal. And I was obviously it piqued my interest because I'm like, did I screw something up? Let me look into this, right? So I look into it, and it turns out there was an entirely different sets of laws that were applicable to the situation elsewhere. So I called her back and I was like, hey, thank God I didn't screw that up. Like, here's the deal with this one. And she understood it. She was like, thank God, intelligent enough to understand that, like, oh, that's why that outcome happened there and my outcome happened the way that it did, right? But I would say, like, by and large, another thing I always try to avoid is when people, this is like kind of nuanced and it's something that I've learned like over time, but somebody has like some legal question about some random issue that they're having and they call. And a lot of the times, like, I'm not going to comment on it because this is going to start a chain reaction of events that, like, I'm not going to represent you on this issue. You don't want me to represent you on this issue. And if I start giving you feedback and you take the advice I'm giving you and then you don't like it after, then you're going to blame me. It's either like I'm going to be in or I'm not going to comment, right? Like, and you have to, like, that's something that I had to kind of learn as I went. You want to avoid that. If you're somebody's lawyer, like, you got to be all in, or, it's not a good idea to be like kind of on the sidelines just chirping unless you're fully committed to being involved. What law school doesn't teach you? So I've addressed this in like a couple other videos, but my academic life prior to my early 20s was very, very dark and meaningless. And then when I bought into the idea of like getting an education, I started to see like a lot of problems with like the whole system as it exists, including but not limited to the arrogance of a lot of the professors and a lot of the other students in law school that I went to school with. There's a ton of very good, high quality, high character people also, but what law school doesn't teach you? I mean, for me, like, I am in charge of like A to Z my own earnings and business, in addition to understanding all the laws that get implicated and the underlying claims that get brought forth and issues. Law school certainly does not teach you anything about that, anything about business, anything about how to make money, I don't know. I think a person's willingness to go out on their own is something that is like kind of naturally occurring in most people, or not. Like, you're either the kind of person who like works at a job or does their own thing or starts their own company or whatever. I think that's more like an inborn personality trait than it is something that you can be taught. Your ability to lead or your ability to be like a self-starter or, that kind of thing. I don't think it's like something you can just, I think being a lawyer specifically, like, it's so tied up in like the mysteries of, like, what do lawyers do? What do doctors do? What do like all these professions that like nobody really understands a whole lot of, and they're like super white collar, highbrow professions. It seems like a dangerous idea to just like go out on your own and like start kind of tooling around and seeing what happens. I think for me, I didn't in law school think that I was going to go out on my own that much. Like, I didn't really know exactly what I wanted to do. I'm a big believer in like kind of following your gut, assuming your gut is like grounded in the right principles, and I sort of just followed my gut into this and have been enjoying myself for the most part. So, I sort of just followed my nose into it, and here I am, Gathering evidence for a case is something that's like, it's actually kind of stressful because it's so circumstantial. Like, even every car accident, every possible scenario that you could think of implicates like all this different evidence. Like, maybe there's video cameras, maybe there's not. You got to figure out if there are any video cameras. Maybe there's statements in the police report that got left out somehow. Maybe there's some aspect of the condition of the person who was the witness. Like, maybe they were drunk when they saw what they saw. Maybe, like my cousin Vinny type stuff where like they didn't have their glasses on or whatever. So like, you have to be able to think very, very very carefully about the facts and circumstances surrounding every case in order to determine like what appropriate evidence to try to find. Because a lot of times you have to be extremely proactive about gathering it too. Like you have to go to places that you never really thought you'd go, like knocking on someone's door, some random person's house where an accident happened in front of, and you go, hey, I noticed you had a video camera out in front of your house. Like, do you maintain the footage? Is it gone? Is it whatever? And you're having a conversation with just some random person at their door, like, hey, how you doing? I'm Paul, So if there is evidence that's critical to a case's success that somebody's not willing to turn over, you have what's called subpoena power. You can issue a subpoena, but in order to issue a subpoena, you have to be involved in litigation. So it's a pretty cumbersome task to get there. And there's a lot of evidence that's like, it's time sensitive, the nature of it. Like a video camera is like probably the best example people think of because footage gets rolled over after a certain amount of time and gets deleted. But you can actually draw like a negative inference if it's called, so what you do is you send what's called a spoliation letter. And if you send a spoliation letter to like a prospective defendant, say like somebody fell in a store and there's like obviously in Walmart or wherever that there's security cameras everywhere, you send a spoliation letter right when you take on a client. And if Walmart says we lost the video footage, in Pennsylvania, you can draw a negative inference that they just didn't want to show you what was on the camera because it makes them look bad. Yeah, so a negative inference meaning like you got this letter right after the accident happened that said don't delete the camera footage, please preserve all the camera footage associated with this incident, and you didn't do it. That means you had a reason to not do it. It's because it makes you look. Never lie to your attorney. Here's why. So this scenario wasn't directly a client lying to me. It happened last week. It was another person who represented the same client, not a lawyer. I'll leave out the specific profession because I think they got enough hate as it is. But this other person who was representing the same client told me that they were going to pull their clients out of this certain deal that I was working toward a resolution on. And I responded by saying, like, I'm doing all this work associated with this. I sent a bunch of information related to the work that I was doing. And the response I got was, oh, I didn't know that. Now that I know, everything's all good, but like I just hadn't been updated. So like this person thinks that they're entitled to an update from me, I guess. So I called the client. I actually typed up an email to the client saying like, I don't think we can work together because like this is effectively like too messy and out of control. I'm now spinning my wheels trying to resolve this for you and you're paying me to do so. But now this other person is just going to rip the rug out from under me kind of thing, right? And so I typed up an email saying like, you have to find a new lawyer. But then I was like, I'll just give them the benefit of the doubt and call, right? So I call and they go, we told that person everything that you were doing. I don't know why they said that. And I was like, I know why they said that because I wasn't providing them with updates, right? Like they think they're entitled to be updated by me. They could just ask you, whatever. So like that was a lie that was told that could have ruined the relationship between me and the client by an ancillary person, right? But the truth is like there's certain areas of the law, like if you're a criminal lawyer, clients not telling you what happened is reasonable under most circumstances because it's up to the prosecuting attorney, law enforcement to prove the case against you. So most criminal lawyers will take the tact of, I don't want to know. Just don't tell me. Whatever it is. I don't really care, but like they have the evidence against you. They're going to use that. That's what we have to work with. I don't need to know anything else, right? But with the stuff that I do, it's all civil law related. And it is important that I have like a trusting relationship with my clients. Like I really want to have a trusting relationship with my clients because it helps me work harder for them. Like me personally, like I like having a personal relationship where I can call somebody a friend after a case is resolved. Like I'm not like a churn and burn guy really. Like it's just not what I'm particularly interested in at this point in my life for whatever reason. I like to have trusting, meaningful relationships with the people I represent that matter, So if somebody's lying to me, it's difficult for me to effectively represent them. A, because that's one of my goals is to establish trust, and B, it could throw a real wrench into whatever discovery process the other side finds out that they were lying to me about. And now all of a sudden, like I'm not well equipped to represent them because like I didn't know what the truth was and the other side found out without me knowing. So now I'm totally blindsided and I look like an idiot, and it seriously devalues the case, or it can seriously devalue the case if I'm being lied to. One of the most important in any kind of work where you're talking to someone to try to convince them to either sign on with you or choose you as the person who does the work for them, the most important thing you can do is be yourself. Because if you approach somebody and you're not yourself, you're eventually probably going to be exposed, or you have to keep up this fake act throughout the entire course of the interaction with the other person that's going to be exhausting. and you're going to start to resent them for the act that you have to put on, even if you don't get found out. Or if you do get found out, now you're found out and they're going to hate you as a result of being a faker, right? So when it comes to like signing on a case with a client that I would like to represent, I think pretty transparent about the fact that like this is the exact kind of work I'm interested in. I think we would get along well, and I think I could do a really good job for you. And here's why, and I don't have to employ any kind of tactics as far as like sales go, because truly what I want to do, right? And if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. Big law, big money, big processes, a lot of talented people. Small law, usually little money, niche focuses, and niche knowledge. Like I do a lot of work with firms that are bigger in size and have very good relationships with like certain lawyers in those law firms that I trust and work very well with. Because obviously like the bigger the law firm, the bigger the reach, the bigger the resources, deeper the pockets, which matters a lot when you're pursuing an injury case. A lot of injury cases are very, very expensive to litigate, especially things like medical malpractice. You end up having to front a whole lot of money to get an outcome that you want. But making an approach to a bigger law firm for most people, I think, is like pretty intimidating. If you see like all these billboards everywhere, whatever, and you feel like you're just a number, and a lot of times you are a number at a big law firm. I mean, that's, kind of the reality of it. And then the hard part about making an approach to a smaller lawyer is you're like, oh, this guy probably like doesn't focus on this kind of work, and he's a nice guy, but I don't know if I should bother him with this and whatever. And maybe you shouldn't. Maybe the guy would tell you, I don't know how to help you with that or whatever. I mean, it's just, I think basically like any other business, big to small, where you have like costs and benefits of either. So I think when it comes to like drafting like settlement agreements, like any kind of document that's going to have like implications beyond what you're agreeing to, there's always risk that you're going to miss something. That's just the truth of life. So like a lawyer's job when it comes to drafting these types of documents is to try to anticipate everything that could go wrong and build it into the agreement as best you can. The reality is like there's times, I resolved a case a couple of years ago where we were under time pressure to come to a settlement agreement based on like the circumstances surrounding the case. And when you're under time pressure, especially, and if it's like a nuanced topic that hasn't really been addressed before, like you can't pull from other samples and things to try to, this has been done a million times, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. It's like a copy and paste job. This happened to be like a pretty novel situation where you had stuff that I couldn't find any samples for on anything. So me and the other lawyer was like a good guy. We were acting in good faith to try to resolve it in the way that the parties had agreed to. But every time we turned around, there was like a new question popping up, right? I still have a good relationship with the client that we resolved the case for, and it's been good, thank God. But like, I just kept thinking like there's just a never ending spree of issues that could arise. So at a certain point, you just have to say like, I hope both the parties act in good faith and treat each other with transparency and integrity, because that's what ultimately matters with any deal, right? Like you can have the best lawyer in the world draft this ironclad contract, but if the guy on the other side is going to decide to act like a piece of shit, then the whole thing just goes to hell no matter what. And you can't you can try to account for bad actors, but like if somebody's going to decide to act dishonestly, you can't account for that. You know what I mean? Like you hope that whoever you're making a deal with or drafting whatever document for whatever purpose, that like all the parties involved in the execution and delivery of that document are going to act in a way that's in good faith and based on the deal that they agreed to. One of the most difficult things about being a lawyer is explaining stuff to clients that they don't want to hear, because you can say it over and over and over again, and a lot of times because it's not what they want to hear, it's going right over their head. Their ears are shut and they're not listening, right? That's something that you have to get creative about if you're managing your own clients as a lawyer, is getting creative about like how to make an approach with someone and delivering news that they don't want to hear, because that's a reality of like these kinds of, there's a reason that there's a dispute, right? Like if there wasn't a dispute, then the other guy would just pay the money or do the thing that you want them to do. Theoretically, they're going to have a reason for why they're taking the position that they are. And sometimes it's unreasonable, in which case that's what the client wants to hear. But sometimes it's kind of reasonable and you have to make concessions, right? I mean, that's life. Finding creative ways to explain to clients the reason that they're going to have to make a concession is something that can be really difficult. It's an art, not a science, for sure. It's very personality dependent. Yeah, you got to know your people.